Naomi's hands were shaking as she gripped the bakery counter, and she prayed the woman behind it wouldn't notice. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice already threatening to crack. "I know we confirmed the Space Ranger cake last week, but I need to cancel it." The baker, a kind-faced woman named Rita, tilted her head with concern. "Cancel? Honey, the party's in 3 days." "I know." Naomi forced herself to breathe, to keep her composure, but the shame was a living thing crawling up her throat. "I'll still take cupcakes, just a dozen vanilla cupcakes, whatever's cheapest." Rita's expression softened with pity, and that look, that damned sympathetic look, made everything so much worse. "It's fine," Naomi added quickly, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. "Liam's only turning 6. He won't remember if the cake isn't—" Her voice broke. She couldn't finish the lie. He would remember. God, he would remember. For weeks, her son had talked about nothing but his Space Ranger birthday cake. 3 tiers, decorated like a rocket ship, with his name written in stars. She'd shown him the picture from the bakery's website, and his eyes had gone wide with wonder. He'd told everyone at school, his teacher, the mailman, the lady at the grocery store. And now she had to go home and tell him it wasn't coming. "Naomi," Rita began gently, "it's my fault." The words tumbled out in a rush, defensive and raw. "I budgeted wrong. I thought I had it covered, but daycare auto-drafted early, and then the gas company raised rates without warning, and I—" She stopped herself. Rita didn't need to hear this. No one needed to hear about how Naomi Carter, 28 years old, couldn't afford a birthday cake for her son. 2 jobs. She worked 2 jobs, and it still wasn't enough. She pulled crumpled bills from her purse and counted them out on the counter, her eyes burning. $43. That's what Liam's 6th birthday was worth. $43 and a dozen vanilla cupcakes. "I'll pick them up Saturday morning," she whispered. Then she turned and walked toward the door before Rita could say anything else, before the tears that were clawing at the back of her eyes could spill over, before she completely fell apart in the middle of the Sugar and Spice bakery on a Tuesday afternoon. She didn't see the man sitting in the corner. Elias Thorne had been reviewing acquisition reports on his tablet when the woman walked in. He'd chosen this bakery specifically because no one knew him here. It was 20 minutes outside the city, small and tucked away, the kind of place where he could sit in peace without being recognized, fawned over, or asked for money. He'd been coming here for 2 weeks, and the anonymity was a relief. But then she spoke, and something in her voice made him look up. She was young, probably late 20s, with dark curls pulled into a messy ponytail and exhaustion carved into the lines around her eyes. She wore scrubs, nurse, dental assistant, and her purse was worn at the edges. But it was her hands that caught his attention first. They were trembling. "I need to cancel it," she was saying, and Elias heard the shame beneath the words. He should look away. This wasn't his business. He'd spent 34 years learning not to get involved in other people's problems, not to let sentiment cloud his judgment. Emotion was a liability in his world. Vulnerability was a weapon people used against you. But he didn't look away. "Just a dozen vanilla cupcakes," she said. "Whatever's cheapest." And then her voice broke. Elias felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd thought was sealed shut years ago. She was talking about her son, a 6th birthday, a cake shaped like a rocket ship. Her words were tumbling out now, desperate and defensive, each one a small confession of failure that clearly gutted her. "I budgeted wrong," she whispered. No, Elias thought. The world budgeted wrong. The world that let a woman work herself to exhaustion and still struggle to afford a child's birthday cake. That was the failure. He watched her count out bills with shaking hands. $43. He'd spent more than that on coffee this morning. The injustice of it hit him like a physical blow, but it wasn't pity he felt. It was recognition. He saw the fierce love in every defeated line of her posture. He saw her fighting to hold herself together, to protect her dignity, to shield her son from the reality of their struggle. She was a warrior in scrubs, battling an invisible war, and she was losing. When Elias was 6 years old, his birthday party had been held in the ballroom of his family's estate. There'd been 100 guests, most of them business associates of his father's. The cake had been 5 tiers, professionally designed, too beautiful to eat. He'd sat at the head of a long table, alone, except for the nanny his parents had hired for the occasion. And he'd blown out candles while strangers applauded. He couldn't remember a single person's name. Couldn't remember his parents being there at all. But he remembered the loneliness. God, he remembered the loneliness. This woman's son wouldn't have a ballroom or a 5-tier cake. But he had something Elias never did. He had a mother who loved him so much she was breaking herself to give him a happy childhood. The woman, Naomi, the baker had called her, turned and walked toward the door, her shoulders rigid with the effort of not crying. Elias was on his feet before he'd made a conscious decision to move. He approached the counter, his heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with business deals or quarterly reports. Rita looked up at him, surprised. He'd never spoken to her beyond ordering coffee and a scone. "The woman who just left," Elias said quietly. "The cake she canceled. I want to pay for it." Rita blinked. "I'm sorry." "The Space Ranger cake. 3 tiers, rocket ship design." He pulled out his wallet. "Make it exactly as she ordered, and add whatever else you think a 6-year-old boy would love. Cupcakes, cookies, those cake pops in the window. Enough for a party." "Sir, that's very kind, but I'll pay for delivery too." He placed his black card on the counter. "Saturday morning, and Rita?" He met her eyes. "She can't know it was me. Tell her it's from a friend, that's all." Rita stared at him for a long moment, and Elias saw the moment she understood. Her eyes softened. "You got it, honey. Thank you." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. Whatever she paid you just now, the $43. Put it in an envelope and deliver it with the cake. Tell her there was a mistake in billing and this is her refund." He didn't wait for Rita's response. He walked out of the bakery and into the bright afternoon sun, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. It was a small thing. Insignificant, really. A cake. A child's birthday party. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Elias Thorne felt like his money had actually meant something. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he'd done one purely good thing. The cake arrived Saturday morning, and Naomi cried for 20 minutes straight. She stood in her tiny apartment kitchen, staring at the massive rocket ship cake on her counter, at the boxes of cupcakes and cookies and cake pops that covered every available surface, at the envelope with her name on it that contained $43 and a note that said, "Billing error, your refund." Sugar and Spice Bakery Liam was jumping up and down, squealing with delight, already planning which friend got which cupcake. But Naomi couldn't stop crying. Someone had done this. Someone had seen her at her lowest moment and decided to help. "A friend," the card said, in elegant script. "Wishing your son the happiest birthday." She didn't know who. She'd never know who. But whoever they were, they'd given her son the birthday he deserved. They'd given her back a small piece of her dignity. The party was perfect. Liam's friends devoured the cake and declared it the coolest thing they'd ever seen. Her son beamed all day, his gap-toothed smile so bright it made her chest ache. That night, after she'd tucked him into bed and he'd whispered, "Best birthday ever, Mama." Naomi let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Then, 4 days later, the daycare called. "I'm so sorry, Naomi," the director said. And those words were never followed by anything good. "We're closing. Budget cuts. End of the month." Naomi closed her eyes and pressed her forehead against the wall of the coffee shop where she was picking up a pre-shift latte. Of course. "I understand," she said, because what else could she say? "Thank you for letting me know." She hung up and immediately started searching for daycare options on her phone, balancing the device in one hand while she stirred sugar into her coffee with the other. The prices made her want to scream. Everything was either too expensive or had a 6-month waiting list or was in a neighborhood she'd need a car to access reliably. She didn't have a car. Hers had died 2 months ago, and she'd been taking the bus ever since. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath, scrolling frantically. "Damn it, damn it, damn it." "Excuse me," a voice said beside her. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I couldn't help overhearing." Naomi looked up, ready to tell whoever it was to mind their own business, and froze. The man standing next to her was beautiful. That was the only word for it. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it a few too many times. He wore an expensive-looking sweater and jeans, and his eyes, gray, intense, somehow familiar, were fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or curiosity. "Your daycare situation," he continued, his voice low and smooth. "I apologize for eavesdropping, but I might have a solution." Naomi took a step back instinctively. "I don't need a job," he interrupted gently. "I'm offering you a job." She blinked. "What?" "I'm new in town. Just moved here a few weeks ago for work." He gestured vaguely. "Finance. And I'm drowning in the logistics of settling in. I need someone to help me get organized. Part-time personal assistant work. Flexible hours. The pay is competitive and..." He paused, then added carefully, "You could bring your son. I have space." Naomi stared at him. This had to be a joke, or a scam, or... "I know how this sounds," the man said, and there was something disarming about his honesty. "A stranger offering you a job out of nowhere. But I promise you, this is legitimate. I'm terrible at managing my personal life, and I genuinely need help. And you..." He hesitated. "You seem like someone who gets things done." "You don't know anything about me," Naomi said slowly. "No," he agreed. "But I'm good at reading people. It's part of my job." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. "Elias Thorne, think about it. If you're interested, call me. We can meet somewhere public, discuss details, and you can decide if it's a good fit." Naomi looked down at the card. Simple, elegant. Elias Thorne, financial consultant. This was insane. She should say no, she should walk away. But the daycare was closing, and she was already working 2 jobs, and Liam needed her. And this stranger, this beautiful, well-dressed stranger, was offering her exactly what she needed. She looked up at Elias Thorne and saw something in his eyes that gave her pause. Not pity, not condescension, sincerity. "Why me?" she asked quietly. He smiled just a little. "Because I think you're exactly the kind of person I need in my corner." 2 days later, Naomi stood in front of a house in the suburbs and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. "Modest," Elias had said when she'd called him. "Nothing fancy, just a place to work out of while I'm in town." This was not modest. The house was massive. Modern, all clean lines and huge windows, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a security gate that had required a code to open. She'd taken the bus to the nearest stop and walked 15 minutes to get here. Liam's hand clasped tightly in hers. "Whoa," Liam breathed, his eyes huge. "Is this where the rich guy lives?" "Apparently," Naomi muttered. Elias opened the door before she could knock, and he looked different, more relaxed. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, his hair slightly mussed. He looked less like a financial consultant and more like a very attractive guy who just rolled out of bed. "Naomi," he said, and his smile was genuine. "I'm so glad you came. And you must be Liam." "Hi," Liam said brightly, completely unintimidated. "Do you have a pool?" Elias laughed, a real surprise sound that transformed his entire face. "I do, actually. Maybe later, if it's okay with your mom, we can check it out." He ushered them inside, and Naomi tried not to gape at the interior. It was beautiful. High ceilings, minimalist furniture, art on the walls that probably cost more than her yearly salary. But it was also empty. Not physically, but emotionally. Like a magazine spread instead of a home. "Coffee?" Elias offered, leading them toward a kitchen that belonged in a luxury hotel. "Sure," Naomi said carefully. "But first, we need to talk details." "Of course." He gestured to the kitchen island, and they sat on opposite sides while Liam wandered toward the living room, distracted by the massive TV. Naomi pulled out a notebook. Hours, pay, responsibilities, and ground rules. Elias nodded, sliding a folder across the counter. "I've drawn up a contract. Nothing binding yet, just a draft for us to discuss. The base pay is $40 an hour, 20 hours a week minimum. You'd help me with errands, scheduling, household management, that kind of thing. Hours are completely flexible. We work around your schedule and Liam's needs." Naomi's hand froze halfway to the folder. $40 an hour? "Is that not enough?" Elias asked, frowning. That's more than generous," she interrupted, her voice tight. "Too generous, suspiciously generous." "What's the catch?" "No catch." He met her eyes steadily. "I told you, I need help, and I believe in paying fairly for good work." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But life had taught her that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "Okay," she said slowly. "Then let me be very clear about my ground rules." Elias leaned forward, attentive. "I'm listening." Naomi took a breath. "This is a professional relationship. You're my employer, I'm your employee. Those lines don't blur, ever. My son's safety is non-negotiable. If I ever feel uncomfortable with him being here, we're done. And my boundaries are not part of the job description. I will be polite, professional, and efficient. But I'm not your friend. I'm not your confidant. I'm not anything else." She held his gaze. "Are we clear?" Something flickered in Elias's eyes. Respect, maybe, or understanding. And he nodded slowly. "Crystal clear. And for what it's worth, I respect the hell out of you for saying that." "Good." Naomi opened the folder, her hands steadier now. "Then let's go over this contract." They spent the next hour negotiating terms, and with every question she asked, every boundary she set, Elias met her with respect and accommodation. He never pushed, never overstepped. By the time they finished, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe this could work. Maybe this stranger, this kind, professional stranger, was exactly what she and Liam needed right now. She just had to make sure she didn't let her guard down. She just had to remember that this was business. Nothing more. Even if Elias Thorne's smile made something in her chest flutter in a way she hadn't felt since before Liam was born. even if the way he'd laughed at her son's pool question had made him seem less like a wealthy stranger and more like someone she could actually trust. This was business. She could keep it that way. She had to. 3 weeks into the job, and Naomi had to admit, Elias Thorne was not what she'd expected. He was kind, patient with Liam, respectful of her time and boundaries. He never made her feel like an employee, more like a partner in managing his chaotic life. And he was terrible at taking care of himself. The man could negotiate million-dollar deals. She'd overheard enough phone calls to figure that out. But he couldn't remember to eat lunch or schedule his own doctor's appointments. It was endearing. Dangerously so. "Mama, look," Liam called from the backyard, where Elias had set up an elaborate sprinkler system for him to play in. "I'm a space ranger." Naomi looked up from the grocery list she was organizing and smiled. Her son was drenched, running through the jets of water with his arms spread wide like wings, his laughter echoing across the yard. "I see you, baby," she called back. "He's fearless," Elias said, appearing beside her at the window with 2 glasses of iced tea. He handed her one. "Reminds me of—" He stopped himself. "Of?" Naomi prompted, taking the glass. Nothing. But his expression had gone distant, almost sad. Just, I was never like that at his age. Before Naomi could ask what he meant, Liam's joyful shriek turned into a sharp cry. She was out the door in seconds, Elias right behind her. Liam sat on the grass, clutching his knee, tears streaming down his face. "I tripped," he sobbed. "Mama, it hurts." "Let me see, baby." Naomi knelt beside him, her heart hammering. There was a scrape on his knee, not deep, but bloody enough to look scary to a 6-year-old. "Okay, you're okay. Let's get you inside and cleaned up." "I'll get the first aid kit," Elias said, already moving. By the time Naomi had Liam settled on the kitchen counter with his legs dangling, Elias was back with a well-stocked kit and a popsicle. "For bravery," he told Liam, handing him the popsicle. "But only if you let us fix up your battle wound." Liam sniffled, then nodded, distracted by the treat. Naomi cleaned the scrape gently, while Elias stood beside her, ready with the bandages. But what surprised her was how naturally he talked to Liam. Not like an uncomfortable adult trying to placate a crying child, but like someone who genuinely cared. "You know," Elias said, "when I was about your age, I fell off my bike and scraped up my whole elbow. It looked like I'd wrestled a tiger." "Really?" Liam asked, wide-eyed. "Really. And I cried way more than you did. You're much braver than I was." Liam beamed at that, and Naomi felt something warm and dangerous unfurl in her chest. "All done," she said softly, smoothing the bandage over Liam's knee. "You survived." "Told you I was brave?" Liam said smugly, hopping down from the counter. "Can I go back outside?" "Absolutely not," Naomi and Elias said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. "How about a movie instead?" Elias suggested. "I have a whole collection of animated films I've been meaning to watch." "Yes." Liam bounced toward the living room, his injury apparently forgotten. Naomi started to follow, but Elias caught her wrist gently. "Hey, you okay?" The touch was light, barely there, but it sent electricity racing up her arm. She looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine concern in those gray eyes. "I'm fine," she said. "Just thank you for being so good with him." "It's not hard." Elias's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "He's an amazing kid. You've done an incredible job raising him." The compliment shouldn't have affected her so much, but it did, because he meant it. She could see it in every line of his face. It's been just us for a long time, she admitted before she could stop herself. His father wasn't in the picture. His loss, Elias said immediately, and the fierceness in his voice startled her. That man missed out on something extraordinary. They were standing too close now. She could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could smell his cologne, something clean and woodsy that made her want to lean in closer. This was dangerous. This moment, this pull between them. Elias, she whispered. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a loose curl behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, feather-light and unbearably intimate. Naomi, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. The world narrowed to the space between them. To the barely there touch of his hand on her face, to the way his gaze dropped to her mouth and then back to her eyes, asking permission. She could feel herself leaning in, could feel the magnetic pull of wanting something, someone for herself, not just for her son, of wanting to be held and cherished and... Mama, Mr. Elias, the movie's starting. Liam's voice shattered the moment. Naomi jerked back, her heart pounding, her breath coming too fast. Elias's hand fell away, but his eyes were still locked on hers, dark with want and something deeper. We can't, she said, and her voice was barely a whisper. I'm your employee. We have rules, boundaries. I know. Elias's jaw tightened, and she saw the effort it cost him to step back, to put distance between them. I know. You're right. But they both knew the truth. The rules had already been broken. The boundaries were crumbling. And the look in his eyes said he was falling just as hard as she was. Terrified, exhilarated, and completely unable to stop. Naomi turned and walked toward the living room on shaking legs, her skin still burning where he'd touched her. This was a mistake. Getting involved with her employer, letting herself feel anything for him, putting her heart on the line when she'd worked so hard to protect it. All of it was a mistake. But God help her. She wanted to make it anyway. The invitation came 2 weeks after the almost kiss. 2 weeks of careful distance. 2 weeks of Naomi arriving exactly on time and leaving exactly when her hours were up. 2 weeks of Elias being nothing but professional, though she caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her skin flush. 2 weeks of pretending that everything was normal when nothing felt normal anymore. It's a family day at one of the companies I consult for, Elias explained, handing her a printed invitation. Very casual. Games, food, activities for kids. I thought, well, Liam might enjoy it, and it would technically count as work hours for you since I'll need help networking. Naomi looked at the invitation. Thorn Industries Corporate Family Day. Thorn Industries, she said slowly. That's a huge company. I've seen their buildings downtown. They're a client, Elias said smoothly. I do consulting work for them. Financial restructuring, that kind of thing. It made sense. He was clearly successful, clearly well-connected. And the pay he offered her suddenly seemed less mysteriously generous if he was working with companies like Thorn Industries. Okay, she said. Liam would love it. When is it? Saturday. I'll pick you both up at 10. Naomi had never been to a corporate event before, and she definitely wasn't prepared for the scale of it. The Thorn Industries campus was massive. Sprawling lawns, modern buildings, and what looked like hundreds of families already gathered around game booths, food trucks, and a stage where a band was setting up. There was a rock-climbing wall, a petting zoo, face-painting stations, and more activities than she could count. This is amazing, she breathed as they walked through the gates. Elias smiled, but there was something tight around his eyes. They go all out. Mr. Thorne. A woman in a business suit hurried over. her smile bright and professional. "So glad you could make it. We have your VIP section set up near the main pavilion and—" "Actually, Sarah, we're fine mingling," Elias interrupted gently. "This is Naomi and her son Liam. We're just here to enjoy the day." Sarah's eyes widened slightly, surprise maybe, or confusion, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, enjoy." Naomi frowned as Sarah walked away. "VIP section?" "Consultant perks," Elias said dismissively. "Come on, I think I saw a cotton candy machine over there." Liam was in heaven. He dragged them from activity to activity, his excitement infectious. And Elias was different here. More confident, more comfortable in his skin. People kept stopping him, executives, managers, employees, and every single one of them treated him with a level of deference that made Naomi's instincts prickle. "Mr. Thorne, great to see you." "Mr. Thorne, thank you for approving the new benefits package." "Mr. Thorne, my team wanted me to tell you how much we appreciate—" "Why do they keep calling you Mr. Thorne?" Naomi asked finally, after the fifth interruption. Elias's expression flickered. "It's a formality thing. Consultants get looped into the company hierarchy sometimes." It was a non-answer. But before she could press, Liam shouted, "Mama, look, they have real ponies." The afternoon blurred into a series of perfect moments. Watching Liam ride a pony with Elias walking beside him, one hand hovering protectively near her son's back, sharing a funnel cake that left them all covered in powdered sugar. Playing carnival games where Elias won Liam an enormous stuffed rocket ship. And through it all, Naomi kept noticing things. The way people looked at Elias. Not just with respect, but with something close to awe. The way he navigated the crowd like he owned it, because maybe, in some way, he did. The way he commanded a room without even trying. This wasn't just a successful consultant. This was someone with real power, and that should have scared her. Should have made her pull back. But instead, she found it unbearably attractive. She watched him crouch down to Liam's level to explain how the rock-climbing wall worked, his hands gesturing animatedly, his smile genuine and unguarded. She watched him navigate conversations with executives while keeping one eye on Liam, making sure her son was always safe, always happy. He was brilliant and powerful and kind, and she was so far out of her depth. "Hey," Elias said softly, appearing beside her as Liam played in a bouncy castle with other kids. "You okay? You've been quiet." "Just watching you," she admitted. "You're different here. More yourself, maybe." He looked surprised. "You think so?" "Yeah." She turned to face him fully. "You're good at this. The people, the networking, all of it. But you also look—" She searched for the right word. "Lonely, even in a crowd?" Elias's expression went very still. For a moment, she thought she'd overstepped, crossed some invisible line. Then he said, "You see too much." "Occupational hazard of being a single parent," she said lightly. "You learn to read people." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the families around them. Parents laughing, kids playing, couples holding hands. When he spoke again, his voice was low and raw. "When I was 6, I had a birthday party. Big, elaborate, expensive. There were 100 people there." He paused. "I didn't know any of them. My parents didn't come. They were traveling, always traveling. The nanny gave me my present, a watch, I think. Something practical." His jaw tightened. "I remember sitting at this huge table alone and thinking that if I was very, very good, maybe they'd come home." Naomi's heart cracked. "Elias." "They didn't," he continued, still not looking at her. "And I learned that love wasn't something you earned through goodness or achievements. It was just absent, a concept other people had. She wanted to touch him, wanted to wrap her arms around him and tell him that his parents were fools, that he deserved so much better. But they were in public, surrounded by people, and he was her employer, and she'd set rules for a reason. "I'm sorry," she said instead. "No child should feel that way." "No," he agreed quietly. "They shouldn't." Finally, he looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. "But watching you with Liam, seeing what real love looks like, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." The air between them went electric again, that same crackling tension from the kitchen, from every moment they'd been alone together. "Elias," she whispered, a warning and a plea. "I know," he said. "Rules, boundaries. I'm not trying to—" He stopped himself, his fists clenching at his sides. "I just wanted you to know that what you're doing, the mother you are, it's extraordinary." Before she could respond, Liam came running over, breathless and beaming. "That was so fun. Can we do the rock wall now?" "Absolutely," Elias said, his business smile sliding back into place like armor. But when he looked at Naomi, she saw the truth beneath it. He wasn't just attracted to her, he was falling for her. For them, for the family they represented, the warmth and connection and messy, beautiful realness of it all. And God help her, she was falling too. Not for the wealthy consultant with the powerful connections, but for the lonely boy who'd never had a real birthday. For the man who looked at her son like he was something precious. For the person who saw her, really saw her, and thought she was extraordinary. This was dangerous. This was impossible. But as she watched Elias lift Liam onto his shoulders, as she heard her son's delighted laughter and saw the soft smile on Elias's face, she couldn't bring herself to care. Maybe some rules were meant to be broken. Maybe some boundaries were meant to be crossed. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to make this work. Naomi's car died on a Tuesday. Not dramatically, no smoke or explosion or cinematic breakdown. It just stopped. She turned the key, and nothing happened except a pathetic clicking sound that might as well have been the universe laughing at her. She stood in the apartment parking lot at 6 a.m, her scrubs already on for her hospital shift, her phone pressed to her ear as she called her manager. "I'm so sorry, I'm going to be late. My car won't start and yes, I'm getting it fixed. I'll take the bus. I'll be there as soon as I can." She hung up and pressed her forehead against the car window, fighting the urge to scream. The mechanic's quote came back later that day. $2,400 in repairs, for a car that was worth maybe $500 on a good day. "It's not worth fixing," the mechanic said sympathetically. "You'd be better off buying something else." Buying something else. With what money? She couldn't afford a car payment, could barely afford the bus fare. And without a car, getting to her second job, the evening shift at the restaurant across town, was going to be nearly impossible. She sat on the bus heading home from the hospital, staring out the window, and felt the familiar weight of defeat settling over her shoulders. This was her life, one disaster away from complete collapse. One broken-down car away from losing everything she'd worked so hard to build. Her phone buzzed. A text from Elias. "Are you coming by today? Liam left his favorite Space Ranger toy here yesterday. I can drop it off if you're busy." She typed back quickly. Car broke down, taking the bus everywhere now. "Can you hold on to it until my next shift?" His response was immediate. "I'll bring it to you. Send me your address." She almost said no, almost insisted she could pick it up later. But she was exhausted, and Liam would be upset without his toy, and Elias was offering. So she sent him her address. He showed up an hour later, and the look on his face when he saw her apartment building made something in her chest tighten. It wasn't a bad building. She kept her small 2-bedroom unit clean and cheerful. But it was clearly low-income housing. Cracked sidewalks, peeling paint, the sound of neighbors arguing through thin walls. This was her reality, and his reality was that massive, beautiful house in the suburbs. The contrast had never felt more glaring. "Hey," she said, opening the door before he could knock. "Thanks for bringing this." She reached for the toy, but Elias didn't hand it over immediately. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Just for a minute." She hesitated, then stepped aside. Elias walked into her apartment, and she saw it through his eyes. The thrift store furniture, the crayon drawings on the walls, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter she hadn't had time to hide. But she also saw him notice the photos, dozens of them, chronicling Liam's life. The colorful rug she'd saved up for, the bookshelf overflowing with library books. It was small and shabby and loved. "It's nice," Elias said, and he sounded like he meant it. "It feels like a home." "It's what we can afford," Naomi said, more defensively than she intended. "I didn't mean—" He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. "Naomi, tell me about your car." "It's dead, not worth fixing. I'll figure it out." "How will you get to work? Both jobs?" "Bus. Rideshare if I have to." She crossed her arms. "I've managed worse." "I know you have." His voice was gentle, careful. "But you shouldn't have to." "Elias, let me help." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I don't need charity." "It's not charity," he said firmly. "You work for me. You need reliable transportation to do your job effectively. Think of it as a company car." She laughed, bitter and tired. "A company car?" "Yes." He pulled out his phone, already typing. "Something practical, safe, reliable." "Elias, stop." She grabbed his wrist, forcing him to look at her. "I can't accept a car from you. Do you understand how that would look? How that would make me feel?" "Like someone cares about you?" he asked quietly. "Like someone wants to make your life a little easier?" The sincerity in his voice made her eyes burn. "You're my employer. This crosses every line we set." "Then maybe the lines were wrong," he said, and there was something fierce and desperate in his expression. "Maybe I don't want to be just your employer. Maybe I don't." She dropped his wrist and stepped back. "Don't say it. Please." Because if he said it, if he put words to the thing growing between them, she wouldn't be able to maintain the distance she needed to protect herself. Protect Liam. Elias looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "But the car offer stands, not as anything else, just as a practical solution to a problem. You can pay me back if you want, or not. Whatever makes you comfortable." "Elias, think about it," he said, already heading for the door. "That's all I ask." He left before she could argue further, and Naomi stood in her tiny living room, her heart hammering, her mind racing. The car was delivered 3 days later. Naomi was leaving for her hospital shift when she saw it parked in front of her building, a Honda CR-V, maybe 3 years old, in a practical silver color. Not flashy, not ostentatious, just perfect. A woman from a dealership stood beside it, holding an envelope. "Miss Carter, this is for you. All the paperwork is inside, title, registration, insurance, everything's taken care of." This isn't, it's paid in full," the woman continued cheerfully. "And there's a note inside." She handed Naomi the envelope and left before Naomi could form a coherent sentence. With shaking hands, Naomi opened the envelope. Inside was the title, her name listed as the owner, and a handwritten note on thick cardstock. A reliable employee needs reliable transportation. Consider it a company car. You've more than earned it. EPS. It has great safety ratings and excellent gas mileage. Purely practical. Naomi stood on the sidewalk, staring at the car, at the note, at the title with her name on it, and felt something inside her break open. He'd listened. He'd heard her say she couldn't accept charity, so he'd framed it as work. He'd heard her worry about safety, so he'd chosen something with high ratings. He'd understood exactly what she needed and had given it to her without making her feel small or pitied. She should be angry, should refuse it, should march over to his house and tell him this was completely inappropriate. But instead she sat down on the curb and cried. Because no one had ever done something like this for her. No one had ever seen her struggling and just helped, without expecting anything in return, without making her beg or feel less than. Elias Thorne had given her dignity wrapped in practicality, and she didn't know how to handle the enormity of that gift. When she finally pulled herself together and drove to his house for her shift, the car handling like a dream, smooth and reliable and safe, Elias was in his office on a call. She waited until he hung up, then knocked on the open door. He looked up, and the careful neutrality on his face couldn't quite hide the worry in his eyes. Naomi. She crossed the room in 3 strides and hugged him. It wasn't professional. It definitely crossed a line. But she needed him to know, needed him to feel how much this meant. Elias went still for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, strong and sure, and he held her like she was something precious. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you. Thank you, thank you." "You're welcome," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You deserve so much more than this, Naomi. So much more than anyone's ever given you." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, and the tenderness in his eyes stole her breath. "Elias, I know," he said softly, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I know. But I couldn't watch you struggle when I had the power to help. I couldn't." She should pull away, should reestablish the boundaries, should remind them both that this was dangerous. But his thumb was brushing across her cheekbone, and his eyes were so full of emotion, and she was so tired of being alone, of fighting every battle by herself. "This changes things," she whispered. "I know," he said again. "We can't. I know." But neither of them moved. Neither of them let go. And when Liam's voice called out, "Mama, did you see the new car? It's so cool." They finally stepped apart, the spell broken but not forgotten. Naomi knew in that moment that she was already in too deep, that whatever she'd been trying to protect herself from had already happened. She was falling for Elias Thorne. And there was no going back. The picnic was Liam's idea. "Mr. Elias is always making us food," he'd said the night before. "We should make him food, like a thank you party." Naomi had hesitated. Bringing a picnic to Elias's house felt dangerously domestic, dangerously close to blurring lines that were already barely visible. But Liam's enthusiasm was infectious. And the truth was, she wanted to do something for Elias, wanted to show him that gratitude could flow both ways. So Saturday afternoon found them pulling up to his gate in the CRV, the backseat loaded with sandwiches, fruit, homemade cookies, and a blanket. Naomi punched in the code Elias had given her weeks ago for emergencies, 1207, Liam's birthday, and the gate swung open. "Remember, buddy, we're surprising him," she told Liam as they parked. "So we're going to set up in that pretty garden area he showed us, okay?" "Okay," Liam whispered loudly, bouncing with excitement. They walked around the side of the house toward the private garden, a stunning space Elias had mentioned once, filled with flowering trees and stone pathways. He'd told her he never used it, that it came with the house, that it felt too big and empty for one person. She wanted to fill it with life for him, with laughter and joy and the warmth of people who cared about him. But as they rounded the corner, she heard voices. "Landscaping bill for the estate, Mr. Thorne." Naomi froze. "Just submit it to my accountant as usual," came Elias's voice, casual and distracted. "And remind him I need the quarterly reports by Monday." "Of course, Mr. Thorne." "And will you be hosting the charity gala here at Thorne Manor this year, or at the downtown penthouse?" The words hit her like physical blows. Estate. Mr. Thorne. Thorne Manor. Downtown penthouse. "The estate," Elias said. "It's more private." Liam tugged on her hand. "Mama, why did that man call him Mr. Thorne? And what's an estate?" The landscaper came around the corner then and stopped short when he saw them. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize Mr. Thorne had guests." "We were just leaving," Naomi heard herself say, her voice coming from somewhere very far away. "Naomi?" Elias appeared behind the landscaper, and the surprise on his face confirmed everything. "I didn't know you were." Clearly. She couldn't look at him, couldn't breathe. "We brought a picnic, but we should go." "Wait, please." "Mr. Thorne," she said, and watched him flinch at the formality. "We'll see you Monday, for work, because that's what this is, right?" The pieces were falling into place now, cascading like dominoes. The massive house that he'd called modest. The way everyone at the corporate family day had treated him with such deference. The VIP section. The easy way he'd bought her a car, like it was nothing. Thorne Industries. Oh, God. Thorne Industries. One of the biggest companies in the state. And his last name was Thorne. "You're not a consultant," she said slowly, the full picture finally forming. "You own Thorne Industries. You're not new in town. This is your city, your company, your—" Her voice broke. "Everything you told me was a lie." "Not a lie," Elias said desperately, taking a step toward her. "I never lied. I just—" "Omitted?" she supplied bitterly. "Conveniently forgot to mention that you're a billionaire? That this modest house is apparently called Thorne Manor? That you weren't offering me a job out of the goodness of your heart, but because—" "What?" "You felt sorry for the poor single mother in the bakery?" His face went white. "You were at the bakery?" "The cake," she whispered, and it all clicked into place. "The Space Ranger cake. The cupcakes. The mysterious friend who paid for everything. That was you." "Naomi, was any of it real?" Her voice was shaking now, tears threatening. "Or was I just your latest charity project? The struggling single mom you could save to make yourself feel better?" "It wasn't like that." Elias's composure was cracking, his voice rising. "That day in the bakery, I saw you and I felt something I'd never felt before. Watching you fight so hard for your son, seeing that fierce love, it moved me. It made me want to help, not out of pity, but because—" "Because what?" she demanded. "Because you're so wealthy and powerful that you can just fix people's problems without asking? Without telling them the truth? Because I was falling in love with you." The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. "From that first moment in the bakery, and then at the coffee shop, and every single day since, I was falling in love with you and Liam, and I was terrified that if you knew, if you saw the money first, you'd never see me." The confession should have meant something. Should have made her feel something other than this crushing sense of betrayal. "You don't get to do that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't get to lie about who you are and then claim it was because you loved me. Love requires honesty, Elias. It requires trust. And you—" Her voice broke. "You made me believe we were equals, that this was real." "It is real," he insisted, reaching for her. She stepped back, pulling Liam closer. Her son had been silent through all of this, confused and scared, and that, more than anything, crystallized her anger. "You brought my son into this," she said, and there was steel in her voice now. "You let him get attached to you. Let him trust you. Let him think—" She had to stop, had to swallow back the sob threatening to escape. "You let him think he might have something permanent. Do you have any idea what that means? What it will do to him when this ends?" "It doesn't have to end," Elias said desperately. We can what? Continue this charade? Pretend that you didn't fundamentally lie about who you are? That I can ever trust you again?" She shook her head. "I set boundaries from the beginning. I told you this was professional, that my son's safety was non-negotiable, and you crossed every single line while I was too blind to see it." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the gate code remote he'd given her, along with the key to his house. She held them out, and when he didn't take them, she let them fall to the ground at his feet. "Was any of it real, Elias?" she asked again, quieter now, defeated. "Or were my son and I just your latest pet project? The lonely billionaire's fantasy of what a real family looks like?" "You were never a project," he said, and the anguish in his voice was almost believable. "You and Liam, you're the only real thing in my entire life." "Then you should have trusted me with the truth." She picked up Liam, even though he was getting too big to carry, because she needed to hold something precious and real. "Goodbye, Mr. Thorne." She walked away from the garden, from the estate, from the man who'd made her believe, for just a few perfect weeks, that maybe she deserved more than constant struggle. That maybe someone could love her and her son without conditions or hidden agendas. Liam buried his face in her neck, crying softly. "Mama, why are we leaving? I don't understand." "I know, baby," she whispered, her own tears finally falling. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Behind them, she could feel Elias standing in his vast, empty garden. Alone. The way he'd probably always been alone. The way, she realized with devastating clarity, he'd probably always be alone. Because men like him, men with that much money, that much power, didn't get real families. They got acquisitions and business arrangements and people who loved their bank accounts. She'd been a fool to think she could ever be different. She'd been a fool to fall in love with someone who'd been lying to her from the very beginning. Elias didn't call. He didn't text. For 3 days, Naomi heard nothing from him, and she told herself she was relieved. Told herself it was better this way. Clean break, no messy explanations or false promises. She told herself a lot of lies during those 3 days. The truth was, she missed him. Missed his quiet presence, his terrible jokes, the way he looked at Liam like her sun hung the moon. Missed the version of him she'd known, or thought she'd known. And Liam missed him too. Her son asked about Mr. Elias a dozen times a day, his little face crumpling with confusion every time she gave him a non-answer. "Did we do something wrong, Mama?" he asked on the third night, his voice small and broken. "No, baby," she said, pulling him close. "You didn't do anything wrong. I promise." But she felt like she had. Felt like she'd failed him by letting him get attached to someone who was always going to disappoint them. By letting herself believe in something that was built on lies. On the 4th day, there was a knock at her apartment door. Naomi opened it, expecting a neighbor or a delivery, and found Elias Thorne standing in her hallway. He looked terrible. His clothes were rumpled, his hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in day. He looked nothing like the polished billionaire or the careful consultant. He looked raw and wrecked and utterly defeated. "Naomi," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "Please, I know I don't deserve it. But please, just give me 5 minutes." She should slam the door in his face, should tell him to leave and never come back. But the pain in his eyes was so naked, so real, that she found herself stepping aside. "Liam's at a friend's house," she said quietly. "You have 5 minutes." Elias walked into her small living room, like a man approaching an execution. He didn't sit, just stood there, his hands shoved in his pockets, looking lost. "I've been trying to figure out what to say," he began. "Practiced a dozen different speeches, but everything sounded hollow. So I'm just going to tell you the truth. All of it." Naomi crossed her arms, armor against the ache in her chest. "I'm listening." "That day in the bakery," Elias said, his eyes fixed on hers, "I watched you cancel your son's birthday cake, and something inside me broke. I grew up with everything money could buy, and none of the things that actually mattered. My 6th birthday was in a ballroom with 100 strangers. Yours was fighting to afford cupcakes for the son you loved more than life itself." He swallowed hard. Paying for that cake was the first purely good thing I'd ever done with my money. The first time my wealth felt like it meant something. "So it was charity," Naomi said, hating how much that hurt. "No." His voice was fierce now. It was me seeing something beautiful and wanting to protect it. Not because I pitied you, but because I recognized something in you that I'd never had. That fierce, unconditional love. That willingness to sacrifice everything for someone else's happiness. He took a breath, steadying himself. "When I saw you at the coffee shop, I told myself I was offering you a job because it was practical. Because you needed help and I needed an assistant. But the truth is, I couldn't let you walk away. I wanted to be near you. Wanted to be part of what you and Liam had." His jaw tightened. "So I lied by omission. I told you I was new in town, that I worked in finance, that the house was modest. All technically true statements arranged to create a completely false impression." "Why?" The word came out broken. "If you wanted to be near us, why not just tell the truth?" "Because I'm a coward." The admission was stark, unflinching. "Because every relationship I've ever had has been transactional. People see the money, the power, the Thorne name, and that's all I become. A bank account with a heartbeat. A means to an end." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I was terrified that if you knew who I really was, you'd never see the man underneath. The lonely, damaged man who just wanted to belong to someone." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You didn't trust me." "No," Elias agreed, and the self-loathing in his voice was palpable. "I didn't. And that was my failure, not yours. You've never been anything but honest and strong and real. And His voice broke. "I fell in love with you. With Liam. With the way you made me feel like I could be something more than my last name and my bank balance. Elias, I know I don't deserve forgiveness," he continued, the words tumbling out now like he was afraid he'd lose his nerve. "I know I broke your trust and hurt your son and destroyed the one good thing I've ever had in my life. But I need you to know that every moment with you was real. Every laugh, every conversation, every time I looked at Liam and felt my heart expand. All of it was real. The only lie was who I pretended to be. The feelings were always true." He pulled something from his pocket, a small, worn photograph, and held it out to her. Naomi took it with trembling fingers. It was a picture of a little boy, maybe 6 years old, sitting alone at an enormous table. He wore a suit that was too formal. His expression was solemn and empty, and there wasn't a single other person in the frame. "That's my 6th birthday," Elias said quietly. "I keep it in my wallet to remind myself of who I was, who I never want to be again." He looked at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "And then I met Liam, and I saw what a 6th birthday could be, should be, full of love and laughter and joy. You gave him that. You gave him everything I never had." Naomi's hands were shaking. "What do you want from me, Elias?" "A chance." His voice was raw, pleading, "Not to go back to what we had, because I know that's impossible. But a chance to prove that I can be honest, that I can be worthy of your trust. That the man you fell for, the one who played with Liam and tucked hair behind your ear and looked at you like you were his whole world, that man is real. He's who I am when I'm with you. And if I can't trust you again," she whispered, "if I can't get past this, then I'll accept that," he said. And she believed him. "I'll set up the trust fund for Liam's education like I should have done from the beginning. I'll make sure you're financially secure. And I'll walk away because that's what you deserve. Someone who puts your needs first." "A trust fund?" Naomi's voice sharpened. "Is that what you think this is about? Money?" "No," Elias said quickly. "God, no. But Liam deserves a man in his life who shows up." Naomi interrupted, her voice shaking with emotion. "Who is honest and present and real. Not a billionaire benefactor, not a trust fund, a person." "I want to be that person," Elias said desperately. "I want to show up, Naomi, for both of you, every single day for the rest of my life, if you'll let me." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and pain. "I can't promise I'll forgive you easily," Naomi finally said. "I can't promise this won't take time." "I have time," he said immediately. "I have all the time in the world. And you have to be honest about everything. No more omissions, no more carefully worded half-truths." "I will be, I swear." Naomi took a shaky breath. "I fell in love with you too. The real you, underneath all the lies. The man who was gentle with my son and looked at me like I was something precious. And I hate that I still love that man, even after everything. Naomi. But loving you doesn't mean I trust you," she continued firmly. "Trust has to be earned. You understand that?" "Yes." Elias's voice was thick with emotion. "I'll earn it, however long it takes." She studied his face, the desperation, the sincerity, the love that burned so clearly in his eyes, and made her decision. "Then prove it," she said. "Prove that you're not the billionaire in the mansion. Prove that you're the man I fell for. Show me, show us, that we matter more than the lies you told to protect yourself." "I will," he promised, and it sounded like a vow. Starting right now. The next 2 months were a study in slow, deliberate rebuilding. Elias showed up, not as Mr. Thorne of Thorne Industries, but as Elias, just Elias, who took Liam to the park and helped with homework and learned to make grilled cheese sandwiches that weren't burnt. He was honest. Painfully, awkwardly honest. He told her about his childhood, about the pressure and loneliness and crushing weight of expectations, about board meetings and hostile takeovers and the emptiness of building an empire with no one to share it with. And slowly, carefully, Naomi let her walls come down. She told him about Liam's father, the man who'd left before their son was born, who'd wanted nothing to do with being a parent. about the years of struggling alone, of being so tired she could barely stand, but getting up anyway because Liam needed her. About the shame she felt every time she couldn't afford something her son wanted. And the fierce pride she felt watching him grow despite their circumstances. They built something new, something real. It was messy and imperfect, and nothing like the fairy tale she'd imagined. But it was theirs. 3 months after the garden, Elias asked them to dinner at his house. Naomi almost said no. The estate still represented everything she'd run from. But Elias had been true to his word, had shown up and been honest and proven himself in 100 small ways. So she said yes. When they arrived, she expected the grand foyer, the intimidating luxury. Instead, Elias led them to a smaller wing of the house, a section she'd never seen before. It was cozy, warm. The furniture was comfortable rather than expensive. The walls covered in photos he'd clearly just had printed. Pictures of him with Liam, candid shots of Naomi laughing, the three of them together at the park. "I'm selling the estate," Elias said quietly, watching her take it in. "It's too big, too cold, too much about who my parents wanted me to be. I'm buying something smaller, a home, not a showpiece. I wanted you to see this first, though. Wanted you to know what I'm envisioning." Naomi turned to him, her heart in her throat. "Elias, wait," he said. "There's more." He knelt down in front of Liam, his expression serious. "Buddy, I need to ask you something important. Man to man." Liam's eyes went wide. "Okay." "I love your mom," Elias said simply. "And I love you. And I want to be part of your family, if that's okay with you. Not as Mr. Elias, who just visits sometimes, but as someone who's here every day. Someone who goes to your school plays and teaches you to ride a bike and helps your mom when she's tired. Would that be okay?" Liam looked at Naomi, then back at Elias. Like a dad?" "If you want that," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I can't replace your biological father, and I won't try. But I would be honored to be your dad in all the ways that matter." "Yes." Liam threw his arms around Elias's neck. "Yes, yes, yes." Elias hugged him tight, his eyes squeezed shut, and Naomi saw the tears sliding down his cheeks. Then he stood, still holding Liam, and looked at her. "Naomi Carter," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion. "I know I started this all wrong. I know I lied and hurt you and broke your trust. But I've spent the last 3 months trying to prove that I'm not the man who hides behind wealth and power. I'm the man who wants to build a life with you. The man who wants to wake up next to you every morning and help Liam with his homework and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes." He set Liam down gently, then pulled a small box from his pocket. Naomi's breath caught. "I'm not proposing in a ballroom or a fancy restaurant," Elias continued, opening the box to reveal a simple, beautiful ring. "I'm proposing here, in this room, with your son present. Because that's what this is. Not a grand gesture, not a billionaire buying a fairy tale. Just a man asking the woman he loves to build a real, messy, beautiful life with him." He took a breath. "Will you marry me?" Naomi looked at the ring, elegant but not ostentatious. Looked at Liam, bouncing with excitement. Looked at Elias, vulnerable and hopeful, and so desperately in love. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." Elias slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into his arms. She felt his whole body trembling, felt the way he held her like she was his anchor to the world. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "God, Naomi, I love you so much." "I love you too," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Liam crashed into them both, and they stood there. A family, imperfect and real, and finally finally whole. Later, after Liam was asleep in one of the guest rooms and the house had gone quiet, Naomi found Elias in the cozy living room, staring at one of the new photos on the wall, a candid shot of the three of them laughing on a park bench. He turned when he heard her footsteps, that soft, private smile already on his face, the one that still made her heart tumble in her chest. "Hey," he said quietly. "How's the newly minted 7-year-old? "Out cold," she said, crossing the room to him. "Too much cake, too much excitement, too much pretending he's not thrilled to have you as his almost dad." Elias's eyes went glossy at that. "I'm still getting used to the fact that you both said yes." "Get used to it," she teased gently, slipping her hands into his. "You're stuck with us now." His fingers tightened around hers. "Best decision I ever made." He tugged her closer, slow and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She stepped into his chest like she'd been doing it her whole life and rested her forehead against his. "I need you to know," he murmured, his voice low and earnest, "that I don't expect anything tonight, or any night until you're ready. This isn't about me proving something. You've already given me more than I ever thought I'd have." Naomi leaned back just enough to see his face. There was no demand there, no pressure, just love, just the steady, patient devotion of a man who had chosen them again and again. "I'm ready," she said softly. "I've been ready. I just needed to know you were real, that this was real." "It is," Elias said. "This—" He brushed a thumb over her ring, over the hand he'd claimed in front of her son and the walls of this almost home. "Is the realest thing I've ever known." She kissed him. It wasn't tentative or unsure. It was a promise in motion, all the slow months of rebuilding and forgiving poured into one long, aching press of mouths. He answered with a soft sound that broke something open in her chest, his hands coming up to cradle her face like she was something precious. The world narrowed to the warmth of him. The familiar scent of his cologne, the steady strength of his arms, the way his shoulders finally seemed to loosen as if he'd been holding his breath for years and had only just remembered how to exhale. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, foreheads still touching, smiles trembling on their lips. "Naomi," he whispered, like her name alone was a prayer. She laced their fingers together and gave his hand a gentle tug. "Come upstairs with me." For a moment, he just looked at her, 1,000 emotions flickering across his face. Hope, fear, awe, something so tender it made her throat tighten. Then he nodded once, as if making some private vow, and followed her. Elias's bedroom wasn't the grand master suite she'd imagined the first time she saw the estate. It was smaller, lived in. The bed was slightly rumpled, books stacked on the nightstand, a pair of reading glasses folded neatly beside them. A sweatshirt of his lay tossed over a chair. It looked like a place a person actually slept, dreamed, woke up alone. Tonight, he wouldn't wake up alone. He closed the door gently behind them and turned to her, suddenly looking almost shy. "If you change your mind at any point," he said quietly, "tell me. I don't care if it's now or 10 minutes from now or 30. Your comfort comes first. Always." Naomi stepped into him again, pressing a hand over his heart. It thudded hard beneath her palm, a wild, human rhythm that had nothing to do with stock prices or board meetings. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm not changing my mind." She kissed him again, slower this time, and felt the moment he finally let himself lean into it, into her. His hand spanned her waist, then slid up her back, tracing the lines of a body that had carried a child, weathered exhaustion, and still stood tall. He held her like every curve, every scar, every sigh mattered. For Naomi, It was a surrender that didn't feel like giving up anything. It felt like claiming something, claiming a future where she was cherished, not rescued, where wanting a man didn't mean losing herself. For Elias, it was a homecoming. Each soft sound she made, each brush of her fingers along his jaw, stitched up places inside him that had been ragged and empty for decades. They took their time, talking in murmurs between kisses, laughing softly when his hands fumbled with a button or when she teased him about being more nervous than he'd been in a boardroom full of shareholders. At some point, the lights dimmed and the rest of the world faded out completely. There were only whispered, "I love yous," the quiet rustle of sheets, and two people who had been lonely for far too long finally letting themselves be known. Later, when they lay tangled together in the warm hush of the room, Naomi's head rested on his chest, listening to that steady heartbeat. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, "for seeing me, for trusting me again, for giving me a family." "Thank you for showing up," she murmured back, "for staying, for loving us." He tightened his arms around her, like he never intended to let go. They fell asleep like that. No ballroom, no audience, no performance. Just a man and a woman who had chosen each other, wrapped in the quiet certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. 3 months later, the nursery was painted a soft yellow, ready and waiting. Naomi stood in the doorway, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly, and watched Elias assemble a crib with Liam's help. "No, buddy, that piece goes here," Elias said patiently. "Are you sure?" Liam asked skeptically. "Because I think, trust me on this one." "But, Liam," Naomi interrupted, laughing, "let him build the crib. You're on decorating duty." "Okay." Liam immediately abandoned the construction project and started arranging stuffed animals with serious concentration. Elias looked up, caught her watching, and smiled that smile, the one reserved just for her, the one that said, "This is everything I ever wanted." She smiled back, her heart so full it ached. 1.5 years ago, she'd been canceling a birthday cake, trying not to cry in a bakery. Now she had a husband who loved her fiercely, a son who was thriving, a baby on the way, a home filled with laughter and joy and the kind of messy, beautiful chaos that made life worth living. "What are you thinking?" Elias asked, walking over to slip his arms around her from behind, his hands settling protectively over their growing child. "I'm thinking," Naomi said, leaning back against him, "that I'm the luckiest woman in the world." "Wrong," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. "I'm the luckiest man, because I found you, because you gave me a second chance, because you taught me what family really means." "We taught each other," she corrected softly, and it was true. They'd both been broken in different ways, both been struggling and lonely and lost. But together, they'd built something neither could have created alone. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue fantasy, but something better, something real. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you enjoyed the journey. If you did, please subscribe and leave a comment. I love getting to know you better. And be on the lookout for our next story of strength, perseverance, and love. It should be on your feed very soon.